It's finally time to read the final hours of Half-Life Alyx. Welcome back to the final hours. I got my coffee, my aperture science. I always use the same mug every day. I just clean it and reuse it every day. Got my aperture science mug, my my quite hot actually, cappuccino. Let's read the last few chapters of the final hours of Half-Life Alyx. I always have to skip past this intro bit in order to get the contents to show up. It's smell the ashes through to the end, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Oh, it's loading. Alright. Smell the ashes. Wake up and smell the ashes. Ask anyone at Valve the secret to a great game. Yeah, unfortunately for me, I've never really had enough people or the willingness to share an unfinished version of my game online to have playtesting. Whenever I make something, I tend to just playtest it myself, which is not good. The irony is not lost on us that the most secretive thing at Valve is located right behind the reception desk. That's so brilliant. Yeah, Valve does what I would probably do in the same context with playtesters. And I sort of did it a tiny bit with Portal Unity back at high school, where we had people playing the game on our systems. We brought people to our systems and got them playing the game, playing the mod in this case. We would monitor them while they're playing it to see what they encountered, if there was any issues they encountered. But we'd also get them to write it down for us. Like, we'd try and get people to write down issues. People were terrible at writing down issues, but it was very valuable seeing people run into bugs. Not that we fixed any of them. Well, Unity is so full of bugs. Oh, I wish they left that in. I understand why they didn't, but on the summer afternoon, one tester is particularly crafty. At the time, Alyx featured deployable ladders that a player could move around a level to solve puzzles. But Valve didn't account for this entrepreneuring tester who puts the ladder into their wrist pocket inventory and takes it along to the next level. There, they smartly deploy the ladder and scale a fence, altogether skipping a firefight against Combine. Brilliant. I like it when games give you options. If you were smart enough to bring that ladder with you, you could skip that scene if you want to. Like, that's just good game design. Top, one of the playtest rooms at Valve, bottom Valve's Michael Copeland tests out a level in Alyx. Yeah. Imagine being a playtester and going in and like being brought into Valve and being like, whoa, what are they playtesting? Like, oh, latest build of Dota or something? And then fucking Half-Life Alyx. It was like, holy shit. Right, so they say here, while that bug would get fixed quickly, Valve did want to give players multiple options for how to navigate the game environment. Problem is that usually the way that developers make that possible is by just giving you lots of options in that combat scenario, for instance. Very few games are willing or have the balls to have the chutzpah to I probably butchered that pronunciation. Had the guts to allow the player to entirely change the way a level proceeds, or the way that some section of the game proceeds. Like, my friends and I wanted to work on a game where it was like a branching narrative. It was like puzzle and shooter based, but it was a branching narrative that legit, depending on which path you took, the game was entirely different. Essentially, we're wanting to make three. This is why it never got off the ground. We wanted to make 3 whole games essentially inside this one game. So like, you get to a point, and there's like 4 different points throughout the game where the story branches off drastically. With one major branching point happening near the start of the game, and then like 2 others happening quite a bit later in different narratives. Yeah. Anyway, something they haven't really talked about, they're not probably gonna talk about it, is that they just brought up this whole thing of like they implemented 3 different movement models: teleport, continual movement, and shift or blink. But apparently, Half-Life Alyx was always, only teleport, right up until late on in the development. Apparently continual movement especially was added more for the fact that they saw other games a bit like Boneworks doing really well with continual movement. Valve had always avoided making continual movement because they believed that would make the player sick. But certain other games that came out around the time of this development led Valve to decide to shift to stick it into 6th gear. And what was that? Yeah, they added continual movement because they were influenced by others. This is a board that was being used mid-development. It's just like a task board. It's actually much more old school than modern systems. Most developers now will use like digital models or digital systems like this. Like at school, at our school where I help with game development students, typically they use, any sort of larger teams will use Trello, a system called Trello to track their tasks and stuff. Apparently, somewhere in fall, like I guess towards the end of fall 2018, the scope had expanded well beyond the original 5-hour journey throughout City 17, with some playtesters taking upwards of 10 to 15 hours to complete the game. Fascinating. Oh, early concept work for the tenement area where players would originally meet the blind zombie. Oh, right. Yes, I recognize this area now that that's mentioned. I believe the guy you meet, I forget his name, he's up here, and you have to hop down. The team also added the idea of spores in the world that triggered the player to cough. Yeah, that's an integral feature of that whole scene, and thus give away their position to the zombie. Oh, at this stage, apparently they still didn't really have the choreo system set up in Source 2, I guess. At least not in this branch. That's concerning. Alright, let's work backwards. Oh. That way. So that one's done. Okay, and now we'll go forwards with this one. There we go. Cool. Ah, yes. Zombie faces. Concept exploration for the zombies in City 17. Can you actually see the faces underneath the zombies in Alyx? I don't remember. Yeah, I was gonna say, if you can... Actually, in Half-Life 2, they don't have particularly mutated faces. Their faces are pretty standard, just with blood all over them. This is more like what they look like in Alyx, which is weird, because it's in the past, so it should have less of this. Oh god, yeah. Thankfully, there aren't fast headcrab zombies in Alyx. That would be horrifying in VR. Oh, ugh. Weird. Decapitated version. Oh. Is that what their hands look like? I don't remember their hands looking like that, but I guess it is. Yeah. It's fucking weird. Yeah. Improvised mask. Yeah. Well, it's disturbing. That's neat. They let all the employees play the game. Every employee of Valve were sent home with like early versions of an index with Alyx and told to like playtest it and give feedback on 4 dimensions: fiction, gameplay, aesthetics, and performance. But the reason I actually brought this up was it said internally there was still some doubt about VR on the team. Apparently. I think people reinvested emotionally in the project after that playtest. I could see the greatness in there, even if the animation system needed work, and we needed a full art pass on the game. Right. So it was still an early version, but it's fascinating that as late as like 2018, seemingly? Yeah, late 2018. Some people were still like, I don't know about Alyx. I don't know. Fuck. Oh, fuck people who are just like naysayers. I get it. It's a company. Still. Oh. Ooh, that weirds me out. I don't know why. The skin deformation. And therefore, and it's the muscle deformation, but therefore also skin deformation. Specifically, exploration of muscle structure on zombies for Half-Life Alyx. Yeah. It's really fascinating how good at this shit modern engines are. Like, old-fashioned, I've been like silent for most of this. Old-fashioned systems had such primitive, like, mesh warping abilities. Nowadays you can like bind it to muscle groups and shit. And you can have almost realistic like deformation. That's amazing. There was, however, one aspect of the game that became a severe red flag during the company-wide playtest. The story. Narrative has always been one of Valve's greatest strengths, especially with Half-Life games. Yet internal playtesters scored the story of Half-Life Alyx at the lowest level of any game in Valve history. Aww. The poor writers, they've mentioned some names that were people involved in the writing of the early version. I feel really bad for them because they tried to do it and they just they've been lambasted. Ugh. The story ended up feeling a lot like a Zack Snyder DC film versus a Marvel film. So it's like the DC films have not been particularly good. But the Marvel ones have been good. It was dark, serious, and laborious. Half-Life had always been a little tongue-in-cheek with action moments offset by Star Wars-style humor. But Alyx was downright bleak with themes of horror, dread, and torture. And long stretches of no narrative at all. It didn't help that all the voice acting at the time used text-to-speech or internal employees. Ah, yes. I'm so lonely playing this game. Yeah. We all had pretty strong feelings about the story. Getting that feedback from the rest of the company was validating, remembers designer Corey Peters, this guy down here. The negative internal feedback on the game's narrative came at a tough time for Valve. In November 2018, just a month earlier, it shipped Artifact, which is a card game that I still have not played. I don't have any interest in playing. I've never played Hearthstone either. I'm not really a card game person. At least not outside of real life. And even in real life, I don't really like Magic the Gathering. So, it's so not for me. The game received uncharacteristically mediocre reviews, yeah. And the Steam player count quickly dwindled. Yeah. Everyone knew that a new Half-Life couldn't just be functional, it needed to be excellent across all dimensions, especially narrative. Yeah, this is so true. To be fair, previous Half-Life games haven't been without twists or nudges needed in their development. That's the thing, like pretty much every Half-Life game has gone through something like that. The classic example of that is Half-Life 2, where, like, right up until like 2003, they had what's referred to as the beta story of Half-Life 2, which was drastically different. And they completely restructured the story like in that final year before it actually came out in 2004. It's amazing how much it changed in a single year. Oh, here it is. I think this is it. The original Half-Life was almost completely rebooted a year before its release. I forgot that that's actually true, yeah. Engine and everything, isn't it? It's like, the engine, the version of Gold Source that it was on was super primitive in like a year before the final game was released. You look at stuff to do with Half-Life 1 a year before its release, and it's super primitive looking. I mean, Half-Life these days already looks primitive, but you look at the version a year before its release, and it's like, it's hideous. It's for want of a better word. It's kind of hideous. And Half-Life 2, the team cancelled the game's E3 reveal just weeks before the event because Gabe Newell didn't feel the demo was good enough. The 2003 E3, it was significantly different, Half-Life 2. And they completely remade. They basically made the whole game anew. Not quite, almost. And they completely restructured the way that the game plays. You know, the layout of the game. What's fascinating is just a moment earlier they were saying that this company-wide playtest got people emotionally invested in Alyx. But then also at the end here it says, there was a sudden air of uncertainty around Valve's triumphant return to immersive single-player games. Interesting that could have both effects. Chapter 12. Oh. I believe I can just sort of like... Oh, I was gonna say I can flick. Rescuing God from prison. The Fishbowl, as it's known, is the largest conference room at Valve. Standing in front of the 80-person strong group, they're at like a meeting. Walker realizes how the project had grown from its roots as a 4-person prototype in February 2016, yeah. Addressing the room, Walker says the response to the playtest has been incredible overall. The sense of immersion in 2017 is off the charts, as is the fun of the minute-to-minute gameplay, but there are problems, he says. Namely, the story and narrative just aren't working, and the company-wide playtest confirmed as much. Yep. We're going to ask if these 3 guys figure it out for us, Walker says, as he gestures over to writers Eric Walpower, Jay Pinkerton, known as 2/3 of the iconic writing trio on Portal 2, and Sean Vanneman, a writer who joined Valve in the spring of 2018 when it acquired his company Camposanto. Oh shit, okay. well then. Yeah, this is a picture of Vanneman and Jay Pinkerton. Interesting. It says Pinkerton, Vanneman, and Walpower were new additions to the team, although truth be told, Walpower and Pinkerton had turned down working on Alyx in the project's early days. Yeah, Pinkerton had just returned to Valve after quitting for a year. I asked Gabe for my job back and he said okay because he's kind of the greatest guy on the planet. Pinkerton remembers, yeah. Walpower just returned to Valve on a contract basis, working from Cleveland, between stints working at his niece's juice shop. I seem to recall hearing about that, yeah. Oh, In the Valley of Gods was put on hold in late 2019. That's interesting. I wonder if it's gonna not be, I wonder if it's gonna be pulled out of on hold. The entire narrative of the game was about to be upended. Every line of dialogue scrapped. The whole game would be rewritten from scratch. Yep. They just do it in a matter of weeks. Holy shit. But that's the thing I've always thought, is that, like, when it comes to a company, this is Eric Walpower, who works on the project remotely. Yeah. When it comes to people like, especially writers typically, unless they're also doing another job in the group, there's only a limited amount of time or a limited amount of work that a writer would need to do for a game. I guess unless you're writing an RPG where there's like every other character has like a side quest or side story that you need to write dialogue for. Like, for a lot of games, the writer only needs to be there for a couple of weeks writing the narrative, and then they're done. As long as they can get, like, as long as they don't have to rewrite stuff, which is quite common, I imagine. Writers will rewrite stuff over and over until everyone in the company is happy with the narrative direction. But, like, I've always thought that the writing group is definitely one of those groups that is unfortunate in it's like feast or famine. You're either writing like fucking crazy, like in a few weeks you're writing an entire narrative for an entire game, all the dialogue, and then, after that, what the hell do you do? Hence why Eric Walpower is like a contractor at this stage. Because it's like he only needs to work at Valve like a few weeks of the year. Like, let's say 6 or 8 weeks of the year he needs to be working at Valve. The rest, he could be working in his niece's juice shop. We weren't going to switch from City 17 to Zen, or an ocean liner. That was immovable, explains Vanneman. Alyx was immovable. Eli and G-Man being in the story was immovable. The basic level track was immovable. The prequel nature might have been fungible? Fungible? I've never seen this word before. But it was pretty rock solid. All the mechanics and maps were staying the way they were, but the whole reason you as the player are going through them is going to change entirely. And oh yeah, the game is supposed to ship in 6 months, Rodkin remembers, yeah. Well shit. This was January 21st. Holy shit. This always happens at Valve though. I've always seen shit like this happening. Like where the story and stuff doesn't get written until like a few months before release. So it's just a mad dash to get the story, the dialogue, the voice recordings done in time. We're absolutely going to try and do this without causing a lot of extra work for all you guys. The writer team emailed to the group of Alyx developers that afternoon. Yeah, well that's good. There was the prequel problem. There's a small world of characters already in Half-Life, and you know where they ended up in Half-Life 2. No one is going to die, no one is going to lose limbs, explains Pinkerton. How do we create tension? Any kind of conflict. Oh, this is Larry, the guy who, yeah, his name is Larry. This is the guy who tells you about Jeff. Why does he have a spiky hat? Oh, interesting. Quickly, the writers rewrote significant aspects of the story, including the tone. The villain, Han, was completely removed. Her character model ended up as Olga, the woman who talks to Alyx through the window in the laundromat early in the game. I remember that. Joseph evolved into Russell, and this location moved from a firehouse to a science lab. Larry, a new character, was added to help explain this blind zombie level and gameplay. Interesting. So Larry wasn't there until later. Fascinating. So I was gonna say, like, everyone seemed to like the Jeff section, and so I thought, oh, maybe Larry was like what the one thing that that remained in that part. No, Larry wasn't there originally. That's fascinating. Perhaps the most significant structural change, however, was the introduction of audio communication between Russell and Alyx throughout the game via headsets. Audio dialogue like that is road trippy and low calorie to pay attention to, says Pinkerton. But at any point, we can easily give the story a little CPR and bring the energy up. Right, yeah. Oh. A version of Russell with mustache, with like Hulk Hogan-esque mustache. Video. A look at the cloth technology on the character Russell. Yeah. I was gonna say, I don't see any cloth movement. It's because it was off. Fascinating. It's so subtle, but it makes it look so much more natural. Yeah, super stiff, and then, there we are. Simulation on. Suddenly it sits more naturally. Not entirely naturally, but much more naturally than before. And like the stuff on his neck like moves like this when he lifts his arms up and stuff. You never really see him running in the game, do you? Yeah. This movement is weirding me out. So it's like sort of expanding out away from his face when he lifts it up. Instead of like clipping with his face, it gets sort of pushed out of the way a little. Yeah, see, it gets pushed a little bit more. It looks a little bit more like it's actually physical. And less like it's clipping through him. Bones that are like attached to or react to the wrist. Oh, fascinating. So like you can't just have the hand like go like that and not change any of its bones, sort of thing. Because like originally you'd be able to move the whole hand, like someone's whole hand, just like boom like that, and have no like changing in the bones in here. But if you actually bend your hand back, like you can only bend certain bones certain distance, and other bones will like react to that change because of the like the tendons in the wrist. So fascinating. The most substantial challenge was figuring out the payoff for freeing the G-Man from the Combine prison. You're going to rescue God or Satan from prison, and he's going to give you something. But we couldn't come up with anything that was worth all that effort. The idea of cycling back to the beginning of the game for a closed-loop experience seemed inconsequential. Fascinating. The potential solution came from the unlikeliest of places. Wolpower was lamenting to Jim Murray about the ending. Apparently Jim Murray is a British comic book artist known for work on 2000 AD and Judge Dredd. Murray suggested, what if instead of going back in time, G-Man took you to the end of Half-Life 2 Episode 2 and saved Eli's life? Wolpower, that's ridiculous. We can't do that. There's a short pause. Well, maybe we could do that. That's fascinating that it's just like a little conversation they had. And that idea could come from that. It's just a close-up of Russell. It's weird that he has the, like, weird but hilarious that he has the voice of Rhys Darby. Every time I heard his voice, I always just immediately was thrown back to, like, Flight of the Conchords. On January 21st, the writers nervously returned to the fishbowl to pitch the larger team on their proposed triage of the narrative. Keep in mind this is a room of 80 people, many of whom worked on the original 2 Half-Life games, and the 3 of us who didn't. Yeah, none of those writers have ever worked on the original Half-Life games. I think some of them worked on... 1 or 2 of them might have worked on episode 1 or episode 2. But Vanneman was new, so he definitely hadn't written anything for Half-Life before. And Eric Wolpower and Jay Pinkerton were more like Portal 2. I think they helped with Portal 1 as well. That's why I think Eric Wolpower might have... Jay Pinkerton came a little later. I have a feeling Eric Wolpower worked on maybe episode 1 and 2, or just episode 2. Because Eric helped with Portal's narrative, the original Portal. And then Eric and Pinkerton worked on Portal 2's narrative. Yeah, interesting. None of the writers had ever written for the original Half-Life games. We're about to pitch to them a retcon of a thing they made 10 years ago. Yes, we were stressed out about it. A board lists out all the characters in the new script for Half-Life Alyx and their state of development. At whatever the stage this is, none of them had ragdolls, but like Eli, Alyx, and Larry were all ship ready. Yeah, and Russell were all like ship ready. Basically, ship usually in this context, I believe, will mean that it's ready to. They're basically done. Everything on them is done. If the game was shipped that day, those things would be considered done. But there was a lot of other characters. Oh, that was just Eli at the end was done. Eli during the game was not. And G-Man was not ship ready. All these other things are ticked, other than Ragdoll, but the ship part is not. Interesting. Anyway, in the old story, fans got to take all the toys out of the box, play with them, but you just put them back in the box and nothing changes, he explains to the group. We have a very crisp problem set before us. We have this prequel problem. We have this not impacting the story of Half-Life problem. And we have this G-Man at the end of the game thing we can't move. The writer's proposed solution, jumping to the end of episode 2 and having G-Man save Eli's life, was in keeping with the G-Man's ability to seemingly warp time and space. The writing group felt such a leap would make Alyx's actions in the game have real, dare we say, unforeseen consequences. That's exactly how I would have put it. Perfect. Too perfect. This idea is going to solve all 3 of these problems in a very elegant, very predictable way, given our constraints. So that's option A. And if you guys don't like it, we're totally ready to hear your option B. He says to the room. Karen Prell refers to this. He says the writers had managed to add an element of levity, or a fun pass, as Karen Prell calls it. It's just one potential roadblock, Gabe Newell. Why do they have such a high detailed picture of Gabe Newell here? What's the point? Oh, interesting. So back in 2000, I'll just read this whole section. Back in 2007, in the final months of production on Half-Life 2 Episode 2, the team planned to end that game with a fun sequence featuring Lamar Clan's pet headcrab floating in orbit outside the rocket that launched from White Moon Base. Newell, however, wanted something bigger and more shocking. He suggested a considerably large nudge, as G-Man would put it. The team should kill a major character for a cliffhanger that pays off in Half-Life 2 Episode 3. Interesting. Apparently Mark Laidlaw had planned to kill fan-favorite scientist Dr. Kleiner. Oh my god. But yeah, they decided to go with Eli instead. The Alyx team had embraced Eli's resurrection, but no one knew if Newell would be on board with such a radical retcon of his self-ordered Episode 2 denouement. Denouement. I forget how you pronounce that word. I know what it means, but not how to pronounce it. Like some sort of god. They went up and pitched the idea to Newell. And he listens and delivers his verdict. The Eli Vance can live. It's like some god. The Eli Vance can live. This change was going to require new art, recreating the White Forest base from Half-Life 2, creating 3 new character models, an older Eli Vance, so Eli Vance from Half-Life 2, Dog, and yes, Gordon Freeman for post-end credits surprise to tease the continuation of the series post-Alyx. Yep. God, I hope that's actually true, and that they are going to continue the series post-Alyx. For years, the plan was to ship Half-Life Alyx alongside Valve's Index headset. Yeah, see, we were talking about this in the previous episode, similar to how Super Mario 64 came out alongside Nintendo 64. Ah, because of the change in story, they couldn't do it. Unless Valve planned to hold back the Index's release. For 6 months or more. When did the Index come out? When did Alyx come out? Oh shit. Oh, I didn't even realize. I kind of forgot that the Index came out in 2019 and Half-Life Alyx came out in 2020. Kind of totally forgot about that. Well, shit. It was more like a year. Almost over. No, it was like 9 months? 10 months gap between Index and Alyx. Holy shit. Yeah, Index would turn out to have to ship with a high price tag of $9.99 US dollars for the full kit and no flagship game. Yeah. This is the head crab inside the fridge. Inside, Russell's fridge. It says, do not eat on the side of it. Ew. Oh, chapter 13. The 13-year wait. Fat men in skirts. Morticians in love. Little boy goes to hell. What? These are just some of the production names you'd see on the marquee of Seattle's Annex Theater in the late 1980s. Okay. Oh, of course, Mike Shapiro is the voice of G-Man. That's right. I forgot about that. They were talking about Mike Shapiro up here. I used to pronounce his name differently, but I've heard that that's apparently how you pronounce his name. Mike Shapiro. He acts, sings in bands like the Dirty Waltz Band and 9 Pound Hammer, and even was the voice of the Staples. What? The Staples? Oh, as in the brand, like the shop? That was easy, Red Button in the mid-90s. Okay, so he's an actor, voice actor, and singer? Most famous role is, of course, is that of a character inspired by the cigarette-smoking man in the X-Files, Half-Life's iconic, enigmatic, briefcase-wielding, interdimensional bureaucrat, the G-Man. he has a replica G-Man briefcase in his home. If you think I haven't thought about G-Man at age 14, oh, I have. And man is not his last name, Shapiro reveals. Did he have a happy childhood? Shapiro wonders aloud one morning in the back of a diner in Lower Manhattan. Interesting. So in Shapiro's mind, the G-Man is a human. I don't know, I honestly thought the reason that, because Shapiro, I'm pretty sure, was one of the people who came up with the idea that the G-Man's speech didn't have natural cadence. It has all unnatural cadence. So emphases are placed in the wrong places, and he lingers on words that you wouldn't normally linger on, like in a normal sort of context. I thought the point of that was to imply that he's not of this world, you know, he's not of that language, because to him it's alien. I don't know. Well, it's interesting to note. While no one at Valve is quite sure where Shapiro gathered all his, how shall we say, intelligence on the G-Man, this is Little Daddy streamed up the entire backstory to inform the character's halting, irregular cadence of speech. Nearly 12 years after his last performance as G-Man for episode 2, the writers at Valve quickly wondered if Shapiro would even remember the character's voice and performance style. Batman's mind was blown that he's writing G-Man dialogue. Yeah. Jamiroquai is the name of... was the code name for the game. Shapiro nailed the performance in one take that lasted a mere 20 minutes. Although additional pickups would happen throughout the rest of 2019, yeah. That's fascinating. G-Man wasn't the only returning character that quickly hit it into the recording booth. On March 14, the team had its first recording session with Merle Dandridge, the actress who voiced Alyx in Half-Life 2. But by late summer, playtests made it clear that Dandridge's performance was a mismatch for a younger Vance. Interesting. The team recast the role in September 2019, bringing in Ozoima, I don't know how to pronounce that name, Akagha, a first-generation Nigerian actress, best known for her role on the Hulu show Marvel's Runaways. I don't have Hulu where I live, so I have no way of seeing that show. That is still one of the most controversial things about Alyx in the public, other than it being on VR only. Yeah. Since the game was in VR, I just had to make sure that Alyx never came across as annoyed, because you don't want someone in your head that sounds irritated to you, says Akagha, whose two older brothers can't believe she is actually in a Half-Life game. Yeah. Oh dear. Q&A, Rhys Darby, voice of Russell. Oh. I hope my voice brings a bit of joy during these crazy times we're living in. Yeah. I really like Rhys Darby's voice. Question. Can you tell us a bit about working with the writers, Jay Pinkerton, Sean Vanneman, and Eric Wolpow? What was it like developing the character of Russell? What appealed to you about him? I can't do a Rhys Darby impression. My brain was like, do an impression. And I'm just like, no, I can't, I'm not good enough. It was a pleasure working with these great gamer writers. Every session we would explore new opportunities for the way sentences can be placed and altered to give a fresh improv comedy feel. The character of Russell made sense to me straight away because he's a smart but calming voice who aids the player who, let's face it, is under a lot of stress to achieve their goal. Yeah. Like, that's the thing, is like, Russell's like the Wheatley of Half-Life Alyx, where he's like, he has to be like the comedy offset to the horror of the game, minus the turning evil halfway through thing. Question. Half-Life is such a legendary gaming franchise. Had you heard of it before taking on this project? Have you played video games much? Any favorites? I'd heard of Half-Life, but I hadn't played it. My 14-year-old son and my 10-year-old, for that matter, were very excited with the prospect of me being part of the Half-Life world. They're avid gamers, and whilst I'm not as prolific as them, I do enjoy a good third-person action adventure on the PS4. My favorites are Tomb Raider and the Uncharted series. Of course now I'm a massive Half-Life fan, and plan to go back and play them from the beginning. Right. How much improv and revision was there along the way? I improvised here and there, giving the writers more Kiwi options. That's what he always does. That's like his thing. It's like he's a proud New Zealander. He's a proud Kiwi. And so like whenever he can, he always brings a New Zealand feel to his projects, which is honestly like why I like him a lot, because I always hear like New Zealand-ness in his performances, even when he's playing characters that are not from New Zealand. There are some things I say in my vernacular which are unique to me and bring a type of comedy that is unexpected. Yeah. Yeah, he does have such a unique way about himself. This is a VR game. Have you experienced VR yet? Yes, I've done a bit of VR on the PlayStation, but this stuff with Valve is next level. Question. Russell spends a lot of time talking with Alyx in the game over radio, but you recorded your lines separately from Ozzy, who plays Alyx. What was it like performing only one side of the phone conversation? I actually enjoy one-sided phone call comedy. I do it in my act all the time. Maybe it's my silly mind, but I like to imagine what the other end is saying, and it's fun to react to nothing sometimes. Right, yeah, because like that's the thing. Rhys Darby does like stand-up as well. He's a stand-up comedian, actor, just an all-around interesting guy. I've been to one of his stand-up performances, and he's got a very unique, interesting comedic sense. Question. Now that the game is out, how has the reaction been? Have you heard from friends and fans who have played it? People seem to be loving the game. I used to be known for Flight of the Conchords, so he's still Murray in my mind. Then it was Voltron. I actually don't know what Voltron is. It sounds familiar, but I don't know. Oh, isn't it Transformers? No, that's Ultron. Like, isn't it? I don't know, whatever. Now it's all about Russell, yeah. I hope my voice brings a bit of joy during these crazy times we're living, yeah. What do you think happens to Russell? A lot of fans want to figure it out. Russell will return. I'd love to see what he got up to in his younger days. Such a mischievous character with an inventive mind. Good recipe for trouble, I reckon. Yeah, oh, cool. I am curious what the writers envision for what happens to Russell after the events of Alyx, because you don't see him in Half-Life 2 or Episode 1 or Episode 2. Yeah, that's why I thought he was gonna die. I honestly thought he was gonna die at the end of the game. Or he was gonna be bad, or he was gonna be captured or something. Yeah, for Russell, the team reached out to Flight of the Conchord star Rhys Darby. Yeah, Darby accepted the role and instantly added a much-needed comedic repartee. Similar to how Stephen Merchant brought his own style to Wheatley in Portal 2. I just made that connection. I like how I have the same... my mind. I love how my mind works sometimes. Half-Life 1's script. So they were just saying, like, the back and forth between Russell and Alyx added a significant amount of dialogue to the script. Half-Life 1's script was just 18 pages. The sequel, 128 pages. Half-Life Alyx ended up as a 280-page script. Holy shit. I think what the major difference between Half-Life 2 and Alyx is that the main character speaks. Gordon never speaks. People speak to Gordon. So you have to be in a context where people are speaking to him to have dialogue. Whereas Alyx, because of the headset and the fact that Alyx actually speaks, there's just significantly more dialogue. Because in that context, it doesn't make sense for there to be no dialogue for long periods of time. Because Alyx would just naturally talk to herself, or talk to Russell, because he's always listening. So, like, it adds a significant amount of dialogue, because it doesn't feel natural anymore. Whereas previously, Half-Life, Gordon was a stand-in for the player, so the player, while playing the game, would speak to themselves probably, or speak, well, they'd think things. And that would fill in the void. Originally. Anyway. The casting for the head crab? Oh my god. So they had an actor for the head crab. They used the original Half-Life sounds. I noticed that when I heard it. It sounded more like the original than Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2's head crabs sounded different from Half-Life 1's. Alyx's head crabs sounded more like Half-Life 1's than Half-Life 2's did, in my opinion. But yeah, so they had the original, they had actor, and they also had samples of badgers, snakes, and a wide variety of dogs. We see these characters as creatures, not monsters. Right. There are moments where they are monstrous, but they can also be sad. Aww. Well, it just reminds me of the friggin' scene. The scene where the head crab's trying to mount a mannequin. Ugh. It's both it's both disgusting and hilarious at the same time. Movement sound effects. Ugh. You can hear the human in these ones. Especially that one. These two. Yeah, interestingly, none of those sounds sound particularly like the Half-Life 1 head crab, but they definitely brought in, like, when you're near the head crabs, there's that, like, noise that you used to hear in Half-Life 1 that would indicate that there's a head crab around. It's like, let's see if I can remake the sound. It's like this little, like, these little, like squeaky grunts that would indicate that there's a head crab somewhere around in the room. Before they even see you, you can just hear this, like... Maybe if editing Rory can be bothered, he'll put in a sound here. Or not. We'll see. Yeah, so they had to assign... There's so many items in the world, and they had to assign different sounds for every single one of them. Oh, interesting. Mike Moraski had never written, or Moraski, had never written music for Half-Life. Huh. I'm always fascinated by the music that the teams listen to while making the game. So that's one of the things that the final hours of Portal 2, like, leaned in on that idea a lot. Throughout the whole final hours of Portal 2, sorry. They constantly referred to, like, this person was listening to this music at this time. By the way, this final hours is written quite differently to the Portal 2 one. I think the Portal 2 one has more pictures and, like, interactable things throughout it, but I might just be misremembering. There were significant sections of text, but it felt more like a book because it was, like, rather than an article. This feels like an article, like a news article, because it's very vertical. The original final hour, the final hours of Portal 2 felt more like a book because it had, like, you, like, shifted to different pages. You had, like, a single page and you'd shift right to the next page. It had a lot of little things that were, like, side things. Almost like notes around the edges of the page, where it would be a bit like these pictures and stuff, where it would tell you a little about something. But it was often, like, it would throw in stuff like, yeah, in this case, the guy Morsky making the music was listening to Nine Inch Nails, Leaving Hope, Prodigy's Shoot Down, and Skinny Puppy's Ghostman, which I've never heard of before. The other two I've heard of. They're evocative of the era. In Portal 2's one, just like the designers, the style designers and stuff, it talked about the music they were listening to. Not just the musicians themselves, but like someone designing these levels, or someone designing the story, or listening to these songs at the time, and they inspired or influenced the narrative slightly. Which I think is a really interesting thing to think about, and it's interesting because you can put yourself almost in the mind of the writer or the developer at the time. And actually, that reminds me, that happens in Scott Pilgrim as well. It's just suddenly remembered. At the end of every novel of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, or sorry, the book series is just called Scott Pilgrim. At the end of every book, there's like a section of like, these were the songs that I was listening to while writing this. And I think that's a really fascinating thing to do. Put yourself in the head of the writer. This is concept art for the Northern Star Hotel. Right, oh, that's the left. Right is the interactive piano and a piece of concept art for Alyx. Yeah. This hotel is fascinating. It's a really cool level, in my opinion. One of my favorites, honestly. This section of the game. Really cool. And actually, that just suddenly reminded me, the music discussion reminded me of the fact that that's one of the ways that Life is Strange puts you into the moment, puts you into the scene. The first song that plays, the first licensed track that plays in the Life is Strange 1 is so, like, for me, it encompasses the feeling of that era and the feeling of Max in that school so well. It's called American Girl. It's my absolute favorite song of the whole series. Of all the, like, licensed stuff. Like, some great tracks in Life is Strange, but in that first game, that first song that plays felt so evocative to me. The, like, scene where you're walking down the corridor of the school, listening, where she's stuck her earpods in, and she's just listening to some music as she goes towards the bathroom. It's so evocative, that scene. It serves no real narrative purpose, that scene, but I mean, it does. It does sort of it serves an emotional purpose, and it's so, in my mind, so, like, evocative. I can't think of any other word to describe it other than evocative. Anyway. Also, I was going to mention, I just read about this whiteboard. They added the interactive piano in the lobby, which is really cool, and they added a whiteboard with a set of dry erase markers. I can't believe I never tried to write anything on the window in the first scene of the game. I guess in my mind, I didn't think it would be possible. Like, most VR games don't let you do shit like that. Apparently, right in that first window where I was, like, staring through the window, lining stuff up in the distance with the drawing, because there was, like, a drawing on the glass of what was through the glass, and I, like, lined myself up, and I was like, perfectly lined up. Amazingly, there's a pin right below where the marks are on the window, and you can pick it up and draw on the window. I never thought about it. And if you like wipe the window, you can wipe off what's drawn on there. But I never tried it because it was early days, I think, in the game, and so I didn't fully grasp how interactable Half-Life Alyx actually is. Valve's Bronwyn Grimes. Oh. When I saw the name Grimes, I was like, that's not the Grimes, is it? No. This is a different person. Oh. Her primary task was working on the interaction model in the world. If you want to ruffle some weeds, I'm your gal, she jokes. So, like, she was the one responsible to some degree for, I imagine, stuff like the piano, like the dry erase board markers, things like foliage moving out of the way when you walk into it. Huh. Yeah, she painstakingly went through the game. Grimes painstakingly went through the game world to make the plants and Zen alien elements more interactive. If a player's hand reaches out in VR, the leaves on a bush will sway to acknowledge their presence. Or if you throw a grenade, the plants thrash around you to a local little hurricane. There are over 106 different plants in the game that each have up to 200 different bones. Oh my god, impacted by the player's actions. And combined with the fully interactive hands, little details like this make the world respond to players in ways never before possible in Half-Life. Yeah. Video, a look at the interactive plants in Half-Life Alyx. I did notice that. It's really obvious in this scene. You can't destroy them, but they sway and they throw around and stuff like that with the grenades. Because this area, you're just given a ton of these grenades, basically free access to all the grenades. They're talking about the team who were making G-Man basically in Source 2. And apparently they purchased a blue suit for G-Man from Nordstrom. Video. Valve animator Paul Duriet demonstrates the G-Man face rig. Yeah. Oh. I like that they have all these constraints. Oh wow. Oh whoa. Ooh. Ooh. Mm. Just you can't do that. You can't have your mouth open and push your lips, your cheeks out. Unless you're breathing. Or you have like a lollipop in your mouth or something. One significant level of the game was still causing concern. Alyx's dramatic rescue of G-Man. Oh. Animation expression sheets from Valve's Jamal Bradley. Look at those eyes. These are the expressive faces that he will pass through and stay within. Oh wow, there's lots of them. These are the base shapes the character will be in, more of a core to move in and out of. Oh shit. Interesting. Oh? interactive headcrab sound mixer. By the way, when I said that Half-Life Alyx, sorry, Half-Life, the final hours of Portal 2 had more interactable stuff, sure, but it was way less impressive than the interactable stuff in this version. Oh, legacy chirps. Yeah, the head crab noises I was mentioning before were a little bit like this. It starts with this noise. It's either one or three. Then it's like there isn't enough space to make the sound. Something like this. Like, if you skip the first sound, if you just make it one of each sound, something along the lines of nah, it's shorter, it's a different distance. Different distance between 5 and 4. Like here. Something like that. Yeah, whatever. I'm not gonna play with this anymore. There's like a ton of sounds you can make. Sure, some people made some really interesting stuff, but I gotta get moving. Chapter 14. Valve Index. Yep, it'll be interesting. Far from his 18th floor office at Valve, Gabe Newell, in his trademark sandals and black Ralph Lauren polo shirt, stands in front of an assembled crowd of 50 employees and friends. This is them celebrating the Index release. The online chatter gains momentum. The chatter about there being like a Half-Life game in development that they had, because they had not announced it yet, gains momentum when an update to the lab mistakenly includes references to Shooter, the prototype pulled from that game before release. So yeah, it has references. An update had references to the earliest version of Alyx. Someone forgot to run a script where we have to take out those mentions, admits Tijiv with an eye roll. Animator Jamal Bradley checks character animation in VR. Right, I guess you have to be in VR to tell whether it's good. So they're talking about the first few scenes. One of the first scenes that was the van crash sequence. It says, at one point there was a discussion of Dr. Breen appearing in a sequence after after Alyx gets arrested by the Combine, although the scene didn't get written. Interesting. Originally the train derailment, the derailing Eli's train to save him from going to Nova Prospekt, apparently that was not going to be in the game. It was going to be an off-screen moment. Huh. The trick in VR, it turns out, is making sure players are looking in the right direction to see the big budget action. What? That's not just VR. That's game development. That's a game development 101. Basically. Getting the player's attention. Super important, and super difficult sometimes. So this is a whiteboard that depicts, like, a scene layout. Helps the writers and animators work out the laundry room encounter with Olga. Yeah. This is, like, the path through a space, and, like, people... Yeah, Olga's here. This is the laundry you walk into, and then you go out this other side into an alley this way. They have, like, cops and bikes, and some random citizens walking. There's a balcony over here, and, like, a bike apparently goes this way. Corner people. A dropship flies past while you're going through this back alley area. I remember that. I believe because this... I can't remember if it's straight on here. It's somewhere around here when you go up this space this way. You end up on top of a building. You climb up a ladder or something and you end up on top of a building, and then there's a freaking dropship that flies past. And I remember looking at it and being like, holy shit. Oh, it was Vanaman. Vanaman pitched the idea of a red herring, convincing players they were off to rescue another survivor of Black Mesa, Gordon Freeman. Oh. Yeah, Vanaman came with an exciting misdirection in September 2019. Oh, fascinating. To introduce this plot twist, Alyx would overhear a conversation between the Combine and a mysterious female scientist who was integral to building the vault. The idea came so late in production that the character, voiced by Kim Dickens, could only appear as shadow play. Yeah, I remember that scene. Her 3D character model is that of Han, the erstwhile villain. Oh, interesting. That's neat. I like that. Even though I was kind of like, Is that Mossman? It's not. I thought maybe it was Mossman, you know? Before we really knew Mossman. A scientist character whose name the writers are keeping a secret could also play a role in future Half-Life games. So they're not ruling out that it's Mossman. If we end up making Half-Life 3, it gives us another character in the universe that we can potentially use in the future. But I mean, they could just retcon it to be Mossman. Just desperate to be correct about my theories. Adding in the Gordon Freeman misdirect required pickup voice-over sessions with the actors for Eli, Russell, Alyx, and G-Man. It's another example of Valve continuing to evolve the narrative and game experience right up until the very end of development. Yeah. Apparently the alien section was just caves, basically, canals. Max Aristov had the idea to change it to a Eastern European zoo. Yeah. Over a period of weeks, the game designers flipped cement-textured canals into a highly detailed zoo with signs, exhibits, and yes, even a zombie zookeeper. Yeah. Chris Remo was 14 when Half-Life 1 shipped. I was 4. So he was born in 84 then. And 4 is about the age when I started playing games, so I could have been playing it. But I don't think I played it until like I was 6, I think it was around like 6, 7, 8. Remo takes particular pride in text he wrote for the in-game newspapers. I remember seeing some of these. Yeah, so these are the newspapers. The terminal. Oh, there's really so much text on this. Unlikely negotiator of peace garners ill will and distrust as well as praise. I'm not a politician, I'm a scientist. Yeah. Dr. Wallace Breen. Portal storm continues. Whoa, I didn't realize there was so much text on them. I couldn't read it very well in VR because I still have a Vive, so the resolution is not great. I remember reading this one. This is a newspaper I did look at. Earth surrenders, and seeing this picture. I couldn't get a good close-up look, but I saw in a video that Valve News Network did that if you look closely, there are striders wandering around, and even like some people here look a bit like Combine, but we know for a fact that there weren't Combine humans in the 7-Hour War. So what are those? Black Mesa disaster. Wallace Bryn. Wallace Bryn. Enjoy the natural taste of water. Exclusive high-resolution newspapers from Half-Life Alyx. So these might not be what the resolution of them are in-game. Not sure. Okay, this one has 3. Let's follow 1. There we go. Follow the second one. Oh, I can't go that way. Okay, second one again. Maybe I can go this way? But then that locks that off. Oh. Okay, wait, no, let's go the bottom way. Okay, that's that one active, and that one active. Now how do I get this middle one active? Oh, there we go. Ooh, that one was much trickier. They're getting harder. This is a slideshow concept art for the G-Man's cage in the vault. Yeah. Oh, they've got these like tubes. I don't remember this tube in the actual game. That's cool. I really like the vault, actually. That's one of my favorite things in the game, especially the color scheme. The strong blues and greens. The vault was still very much a working project at the end of 2019. Well, not the end, but close to the end. Playtesters reported feeling underwhelmed with the finale's gameplay. In the original concept, the Combine caged the G-Man in an isohedron-shaped cell by pulling his presence across multiple dimensions. When the player reached the G-Man's cage, they would tune these dimensions back into harmony using a slider, eventually releasing Half-Life's legendary Man of Mystery. Whiteboards for animators to work out the beats of the final G-Man sequence, yeah. Realizing that conclusion was underwhelming, Casale came up with an ambitious yet potentially memorable surprise. Since the Vortigaunt's vortessence is used to power the vault. Oh, I didn't actually realize that, of course. Of course, that makes sense. Because they're using energy from Vortigaunts to keep the vault where it is. When you disconnect the Vortigaunts, the vault falls to the ground. So it only makes sense that also the material, the stuff that's powering the internal components of the vault as well are Vortigaunt energy. What if Alyx was able to tap into the Force? Similar to a Force lightning moment in Star Wars, and use that to free the G-Man. Yeah, that is the coolest part of that scene. Is having the power of the Vortigaunts to, like, fire lightning. The idea was the Combine accounted for a lot of things in design of the vault, but they didn't think about what happens when you combine Vort energy with a little Zen crystal in Alyx's gravity gloves, explains Tristan Reedford. Similar to the energy balls in Half-Life 2 that could overpower the Combine, Alyx would pull Vort energy off discharge points in the vault, and use that force to defeat the Combine guards, ultimately freeing the G-Man. Such an ambitious change added significant new gameplay coding to the final sequence, yeah. Dario Casale reviews, new concept art for the Vault's final sequence. Yeah. Alongside this late addition, a number of puzzles in the early part of the Vault were removed. In prior versions of the Vault, players had to solve a series of mirror matching puzzles in an apartment block, carefully placing props like a breadstick and an ashtray in the exact same position as a mirrored version of the room above their head. Oh, that's why that is the way it is. The rooms and accessories stayed in the final game, but the matching sequences did not. Yeah, I don't remember looking at all that stuff. That sequence is a bit of a walking simulator, and I can see why, because they had puzzles in them, but they removed them. I get it though. Like a mirror matching puzzle could be quite weird, and if it's not like directed, because who would be directing you? If it's not directed, that would be very confusing. So at this stage, they're already like, March 2020, that's the aim. Even though previously the aim had been the end of the year. And that meant it was time to do something everyone was dreading. Figuring out how to tell the world about the game. Previous Half-Life games had been announced years in advance of their actual release dates, and as internet legend goes, Valve rarely met those release dates. Valve time, as it is known, is defined by the Urban Dictionary as the expanded time Valve uses when talking about anything that will involve them working. Like a New York minute, but in reverse. Yeah. The conversion factor is approximately 2 to 6 times whatever is stated. But it's not always that way. Sometimes it's like next week, and then like 2 days later they release it. So like, it's not always that direction. Interesting. So Greg Coomer is saying, I mean, we were taking our flagship franchise and making it VR only. So these are concerns about fans might not be so happy about it being Half-Life, yay! But then VR, so like thousands of people won't be able to play it. Millions of people, potentially. We didn't know how it would go, and we didn't want it to seem like we were using Half-Life to leverage our hardware. Fascinating thing with that, though, is that just a little bit earlier, they were talking about how they wanted to do the Nintendo model, which is exactly what they do. They use Mario and Zelda to sell their new hardware. So they want their cake and they want to eat it too. You can't have both. To be fair, to give them credit, Alyx is playable with Oculus and Windows Mixed Reality as well, because it's just Steam VR, and it's not like locked into their latest hardware, which is something that friggin' Nintendo does all the time. Like, you get a version of a game. I'm just shitting on Nintendo now. You get a game, but it's like, it could so totally run on one of the older consoles, but they make it the latest console only to drive sales. Because they're a business with business-minded, ideals. Whereas a company like Sony, because all their stuff is third-party, a lot of the developers will make the game for PS4 and PS5, for instance. In that transitionary phase between consoles, the developers, because they're a third-party developer, most of them, they... Not all of them. Sometimes, like, Naughty Dog will release something for PS3 and 4, for instance. But most of the time it's, as third-party developers, they have their own interests in mind when making the game. So they don't want to split... They don't want half the audience to not be able to get it because they don't have the latest console, so they'll often release for both consoles so as to meet the most market, which is the most consumer-friendly method as well. If you release on all consoles, and you release on multiple different consoles, that's the most consumer-friendly method, because you're allowing as many people to play it, and not limiting people via other methods. It's purely based on whether you want the game or not, basically. This is Valve's hardware manufacturing facility. I've seen this before, because this is also where they used to make controllers there. They might still make the controllers there, but yeah, this is a Valve-owned manufacturing system. And I believe they have a whole bunch of like Aperture Science, like tags on stuff. It's like a little tongue-in-cheek thing of like, this is like their Aperture Science labs. You know, where normally you'd have turrets being manufactured. This is their like controllers and index manufacturers. So yes, there were a lot of internal concern that we were about to give the internet the wrong Half-Life game. Oh wait, Casey, isn't she the like head of PR now at Valve? Head of like community interaction? They just kept saying to me, we feel really good about what we've made, but we're really worried about how we let people know about what we're working on. Why do I feel like this is the woman who's like made Valve much more like consumer oriented? What? That's not the word. I think Casey's the one who's made Valve much more like communicative. She joined them around that later time. As Summer turned to fall, Valve brought Casey into the staff, yeah. Valve's Casey Aitchison Boyle joined the company to help on Half-Life Alyx PR. But not just Half-Life Alyx, like just their PR generally. While they wouldn't come out and say it directly, Valve was anticipating fans to speculate on what was next in line, an actual Half-Life 3. Yeah. A wall at Valve details each shot in the reveal trailer for Half-Life Alyx. Yes, they're talking about doing reveal trailers and stuff like that. Oh. What's with these little faces on things? Was this so that... Oh, I wonder. Was this... were these stickers they actually put on the thing, or has this been, like, photoshopped to include them? It almost looks like these little face thingies are actual stickers they've put on top of it before they've allowed someone to take a photo of it. Yeah, it's a shot breakdown of the reveal trailer. Yeah, Gabe Newell even wasn't sure how people would react. He's usually pretty good at determining that, but he was not sure with this one. When he emails me the night before the trailer's release, I sense the uncertainty. Yep, it'll be interesting. He matter-of-factly writes to me at 2:54 in the morning. After over a decade of questions, half-answers, uncertainty, and speculation, Half-Life is about to return. The announcement trailer. Yes, this is the very first trailer they released of Alyx. I remember watching this and being fucking mind-blown that it was actually happening. I think I did a live reaction, didn't I?
Alyx! I'm here.
Pretty sure there was a stream the next day. So I did a live reaction.
What we're doing here could change things forever.
There's no straight shot to the vault. I'm gonna head inside, find a way out.
Got it. I'm with you every step of the way.
You're gonna need a gun! Don't worry, it's unloaded.
I was immediately like, holy shit.
It's unloaded now!
I was like, holy shit, it's Reese Darby.
Combine channel's really picking up. They know you're coming. You need to get out of here, now. Oh god.
They've got Dad.
They're gonna find out what he knows, and then they're gonna kill him.
All this is my fault. I never told you. I couldn't. I'm so sorry, baby.
You will not save him. Alyx Vance alone cannot predict his fate.
Close your eyes, honey.
Yeah, at that stage in the game. Oh, yeah. At that stage in the game, they still had Merle Dandridge as the voice actor for Alyx. And so a lot of people were a little upset because they felt it almost disingenuous to have Merle in that trailer, but to have someone else actually voicing Alyx in the game. And I'd be super curious because they seemingly voiced almost everything. Well, the majority of the game they got Merle to voice. I am super curious as to what that sounded like. I would love to see, like, them release the sounds. Like, at some point, maybe a leak will happen and people will get access to the original Merle recordings and mod the game so that Alyx's lines are all spoken by Merle, as many as can be found, as many as were recorded, and see how the difference is, see how it feels. Because it might just be that they were right in doing it. Maybe there is a significant difference, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't feel right with Merle. But part of me thinks that, much like there's some ideas that they had in the original versions of Half-Life 2 and stuff like that, that I thought that it would have been so much cooler. It might have been better with Merle. But we'll never know, unless we have access to those audio clips. With near universal praise for the trailer, the team was relieved, yeah. I guess we had sort of underestimated everyone's appetite for more single-player stuff from Valve, and more Half-Life. Chapter 15, that's the last chapter. I've already been recording for 2 hours, but this has to... like, we're finally here, we're in the last chapter. TF2 background. This is a Zoom call, is it? Because 2020, coronavirus. This is like all the employees at Valve. There's Jay Pinkerton there. Is it Kumar? Yeah. I would have missed a ton of people, because a ton of people I recognize, just because it's so many people. And some of the people look different before and after COVID. And some people have a fucking camera like this. Alright, let's move on. I'll see you up ahead. It's early March 2020 and an invisible head crab is on the loose inside of Half-Life Alyx. Is it a bug? An invisible head crab? Yeah, East Seattle, home to Valve, has unfortunately become an early hotspot in the US for COVID-19 pandemic, yep. With a worker in Valve's 31-story office tower testing positive for the virus, the entire company transitioned to work from home from the final weeks of development. I'm assuming they mean, because Valve just has a few floors of this building, they don't own the entire building. It would have been one of the other offices, one of the other people. I doubt it was one of Valve's members who tested positive, but someone in the building that they all work in, someone tested positive, and so they all just were like, shit, let's all go home. Let's not leave our homes anymore. Yeah, it's like the opposite of crunch time. Everyone's at home, working on the game in their own time. David Sprayer, sits at home to ship Alyx. Yeah, that's funny. Bottle of, I don't know, whiskey or bourbon or something on the desk, and on a Zoom call with a bunch of people. How did Jeff Keighley get this picture? Unless he got it given to him by Spayer's spouse or something like that, or a family member, and they sent it to Jeff for this. Oh, yeah. The final hours of game development in 2020 are very different than they were in 1998. Back then, day one patches were non-existent. The game came on a CD-ROM that had to be pressed at a plant weeks before it arrived in a box to customers. Today, Valve can make changes to the code right up until hours before an all-digital launch on Steam. Yeah. And if anything is broken, the game can be updated in real time. It says, but then, this is good. This is good to hear this. Does that decrease the pressure to find every last bug? Not really, says Spayer. The first impression is everything on a narrative game, he explains. Yes, that's the thing. I wish more developers had this mindset, because so many developers are just like, or not developers, more it's the publishers, are just like, yeah, it's okay. We'll just fix the bugs after the fact. No. The version that's printed on disc should be as polished as physically possible. Past Half-Life games going gold was celebrated with ceremonial piñata whack by a crowbar. A piñata wasn't on the cards for Alyx. Valve's Kelly Klein had spent weeks preparing an elaborate setup of cakes for a team celebration. Aww. I was gonna say, they should have done something else because Alyx doesn't use a crowbar. You know, the crowbar's for Gordon games. There was to be a mock wooden crate made of marbled cake with rum buttercream. Oh, I haven't eaten much this morning, so that makes me hungry. A life-sized head crab cake of red velvet and strawberry buttercream. I don't like red velvet, even though it's mostly just chocolate. I'm not really a fan of red velvet for whatever reason. Chocolate coins with a lambda symbol. Why can't I say that? Chocolate coins with a lambda symbol. And of course, Valve's most famous snack, the big pink cookie. Excusez-moi. I don't know what that is. I've been studying Valve and Valve games for years. I've never heard of this big pink cookie before. What is that? What is that? Everything was postponed. The cakes, the trip to Hawaii in April. Oh my god. Someone at Valve has the Gmod G-Man as their picture. Holy shit. I use this picture in my thumbnails every now and then. I like cropped out the head so I could put him in like whenever I'm playing Gmod. Oh, it's 23rd. I thought it was the 20th. If you were to walk through the development floor, you'd see nothing more than mouse cursors swirling across screens as employees use a remote desktop to log into their machines and complete last-minute fixes. That's funny. I'm imagining just a full Valve office empty, but all the computers have like shit going off on them. It's really funny to imagine. Yeah, Zoom launch party for Alyx. I can't believe someone has this G-Man thing as their picture. Over 130 employees gathered for a massive Zoom video conference to release Half-Life Alyx. Oh? It says, in a throwback to the original game 22 years ago, Dario Casali set his Zoom backdrop to a screenshot of a head crab attacking the camera in Half-Life. They don't show it here. There's a head crab here, but that's not Dario, I don't think. In a way, the staff at Valve experienced the launch of Alyx just like millions of fans around the world, sitting at their home computers, ready to watch top influencers, streamers, and uncover the secrets hidden inside City 17. I'm a influencer streamer. Sort of. Yeah, even Gabe Newell has a surreal experience with the game's launch. From a remote, okay, very remote location, his boat on the South Pacific Ocean. They say that, but yeah, I was gonna say, it's New Zealand. He was in New Zealand! Oddly enough, I'm somewhat stuck in New Zealand right now, which adds to the surreal feeling of shipping in the time of, cholera. Does he mean COVID? With press reviews that scored Alyx higher than any previous Half-Life game, the team was beyond relieved that Alyx lived up to expectations. It was 4 years of work for a 16-hour game, reflects Dario. So 4 hours of gameplay a year. I think ultimately, what we've built exceeds the polish of any previous Half-Life game. Yeah. With the success of Alyx, the obvious question is, what's next for Valve? No Valve press interview goes by without a journalist trying to elicit some kind of confirmation or hint of Valve's plans for Half-Life beyond Alyx. Armed with the now finished Source 2 engine, and void of the trepidations associated with returning to Half-Life, the team is energized to dive into what's next. The ice has been broken. Now we're hoping to smash through the ice completely. We're not afraid of Half-Life no more. Now that we've got a taste of making big stuff again, we want to keep doing that. Going from this to a new big thing, which will be even bigger, is pretty exciting. Maybe there'll be surprises as well, including a top secret new project for another small team at Valve has been working on since the first part of 2018. Is that why on the map that they on the timeline they kept showing for Half-Life Alyx for Valve generally, 2018 is surprisingly empty. 2018 has a big like triangular void where there's nothing. It makes me wonder if top secret new project. Yeah. This is a quote that's just, it's like here and then it's repeated right here. Gabe and I have a lot of ideas on how to make hardware more like software. I am curious. Yeah, Newell keeps wanting to test brain-computer interfaces. Imagine a headset that can read a player's brain to determine if they're happy, sad, frustrated, bored, focused, or distracted while playing a game. I think it's too invasive. It's too... like, even if it was just a thing that read your perception, people would be freaked out by that. New era of Valve is upon us. With with a finished Source 2 engine powering a new generation of games, yeah. Valve can, however, be unpredictable, and there's no guarantee it won't once again burn years of work until it finds and ships its next worthy project. Here's hoping that doesn't happen again. None of this is lost on Jay Benson, who... This is the guy we started with, Jay Benson. Wait, is this him? Valve's Jay Benson. Illustration by Tim O'Brien. Who now has a 5-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son at home with his wife Jenny. A few weeks ago when he called up the Half-Life Alyx trailer on the home computer, Benson's daughter came rushing over to the screen. "It's Daddy's game," she said excitedly, pointing a finger at the screen. Aww. Benson's memories of playing Half-Life with his father flashed before him 22 years ago. Yeah. The same franchise was connecting him with his daughter. Aww. Much like Eli ceremoniously passing the crowbar back to Gordon in the game's end credit scene, the magic of Half-Life is now being passed to a new generation of gamers. Yeah. Oh? That's it. That's the end. Yeah, that was the final chapter. Well, very interesting. Now that I've read this myself, I can go and look at what people have gleaned from this, because while this is super interesting to me, like, I'm really curious. Oh, I wonder if we'll see the head crab on the screen thing on here. It says head crab on the screen, but that's not Dario. Very curious to see if the head crab is shown on here. Yeah, while I find this super fascinating and I love reading about this kind of stuff, oh, is that it? That's it there, I think. This is it here. This must be Dario here. The head crab, the Half-Life 1 head crab jumping at the screen. I know that people more versed in this kind of stuff, more versed in finding the minute details, might have come to different conclusions than I did. So I'm really curious to see what the likes of Tyler has said about it, because I've avoided watching his stuff until I read this myself. I'm really curious to know if people have picked up hints as to what might be. Yeah. But whatever the case, that wraps this up for us. This is the end of the final hours for Half-Life Alyx. Let me know. It'll probably be a long shot, but let me know if you want to see me read through the final hours of Portal 2, because that is a book / documentary that I loved when I originally read it. Reading that really made me double down on wanting to work at Valve back in the day. Little did I know, little did Babyius, little did baby Rory know that would precede the era of Valve where they didn't release anything. Yeah. I was just finishing up the previous episode when I realized that there's totally... Wait, cover? Ah, right. There's totally... This... I have to... No, don't exit. Chat! There's totally... Valve 3D Tour. Is this like a full-on actual 3D tour? Valve Development Office Tour. Welcome to Floor 14 at Valve Software in Bellevue, Washington. In addition to housing the main lobby, this floor is home to the entire Half-Life Alyx development team. This experience lets you explore and tour the full development area, as scanned in April 2020. Oh. This is shortly after release, and once COVID was in full force, so like, I guess a small team of like quarantining individuals came in and captured the office. In addition to this top-down isometric view, you can click to any circle to enter a high-resolution panoramic photo mode. Also, try an experimental first-person view by clicking the person icon. Oh, okay. Oh my god, look how many circles there are. Holy shit. So this is how to spin around. You know what? I think we won't worry about this. I could be here all day looking at this. There are so many little dots. And I think it's just like in office stuff. Let's see if I click walk. Alright, I have to click and drag to move the mouse, move the camera. So they made like a, like it's pretty, it's just like those VR systems where they put the camera down and they capture the 3D space. It's pretty like messy, but it's like the start of an interesting technology. Let me know if there's something like that I should look at closely in here. Otherwise, I think I will just, I won't worry about this. But this is really cool, being able to see like the actual hallways and stuff of Valve's offices. Because like I've seen this in pictures, but I've never been there. And you know, I found that it's not that many people get to, oh, it's a flat image. You're looking from like this angle, it looks just like it looks perfectly normal. But no, same here, it's like, you look from about there, it looks normal. Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to go to Valve and have a tour of the offices. But, yeah. I don't think it would be worth... It'd be really cool, but, like, to get there, I would have to fly to Seattle. And I just don't think it would be it's worth the, like, something like 12-hour flight. Because for me, I'm not skilled. Like, the reason I'd want to go there is I want to look around, and I'd also want to be like, I'm interested in working for you guys. But I'm not good enough to work at Valve. Valve is veterans. I'd have to work on my portfolio. I'd have to work really hard on some actual interesting projects before trying to be ballsy and apply at Valve. But yeah, that's it. This is their like famous Valve in their like lobby of their studio area. But we'll leave that there. Whatever the case. If you like what you saw, hit like. If you want to see more from me, then subscribe. Here's to the next 10 years. And here's to hoping that Valve releases a bunch of cool games in the immediate future. I wish Valve all the best with their future endeavors. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.